Okay, thank you for coming for the Python meetup. Good to see so many of you. This is nice. Nice April. We'll start with some announcements, a little bit of them. So the beverages and the pizza that you just got, they are sponsored by Anaconda. Anaconda is the Python, the biggest Python distribution, and they are actually developing here in town, in New York and Berlin. And they have several career options that they want to announce. So Peter is usually here, but I'm replacing him tonight. And if you're interested in some work to do, with Python and some in the biggest Python distribution around, then please contact Anaconda. It's www.anaconda.com/careers. Actually, I recommend it's a good company. They actually, last week, they just made AnacondaCon. You should have been there. I've been there, one of the biggest, nicest conferences around. Whenever they'll have the videos out, I actually recommend you to look at all of those, but I'll just give you highlights. The PyViz tools, panel hall views, are now doing great. You should all try them. And of course, Dask and some of the other tools, the open source tools that they're developing. If you don't know all the names that I just said, come talk to me later. I'll tell you more about them. I use them myself, and those are great tools. Another announcement is PyTexas is this weekend, is the 13th and the 14th. If you're interested in more information, it's pytexas.org. Otherwise, unless there's a very just important announcement by anyone, we will proceed and ask Nick. Yeah, Danny might have something. PyTexas is the central library here. It's Chavez, and I think it's $85, but double check me, pytexas.org. I'm not sure how many tickets they still have. It's a 2-day event, and I've been to PyTexas several times. I had a very nice experience. Highly recommended if you want to meet many developers out there. Anything else? Okay, so PyTexas is covered. At this point, I would like to, what we'll see tonight here is Nick Gottslick, and I hope I didn't butcher your name. Yeah, good. He will be talking about how to access social media with Python, and he will educate me a little bit about this. And afterwards, we'll have a small lightning talk by Michael Verhulst. We'll make a small resource in the middle, and Nick, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Jacob. Okay, thanks for coming out tonight. I know you had many options of how to spend your Wednesday night, but for whatever reason, you chose to come listen to me talk. So let's get started. I'll be talking about how to abuse social media APIs, how to use Python for privacy's sake. So who am I? I'm a software engineer at a company called Bizarre Voice in town. We make display platforms for ratings reviews for some of our clients like REI, Kate Spade, Gap, etc. During the day, I'm mainly a JavaScript, React, Redux developer. I know, boo. But at night, I put on my alter ego and start developing stuff in Python, because we all know that Python is by far the superior programming language, right? Right. So one of the things I made is called Social Amnesia. And what Social Amnesia lets you do is it lets you manage the history of your Reddit and Twitter accounts. So it's a bit easier to show you if I just pull up the app right here. I don't know how easy this is to see on the screen. Okay, you can kind of see it. So as you can see here, I'm logged into Reddit, I'm logged into Twitter. I can do things like, okay, I want to save so many days of items, like maybe you wanted to save the last 7 days of tweets and delete everything past that. You can say, okay, I want to save tweets that got 100 favorites. Those tweets have done well, so I want to save that. You can pick tweet the whitelist. So you'll say, okay, these tweets I really like, so I'm going to save this one, and then the rest of them we can go ahead and delete. And then when you're ready to delete, you hit delete. It goes and it finds all the tweets, and good, it actually found them successfully. And you can say, okay, proceed, delete all these tweets, or you can cancel. This is built entirely in Python. It also lets you schedule this to run each day down here. Okay. So why did I build this? Well, first off, in the world of Reddit, most people are pseudonymous, so they have usernames that they hide that they have their accounts on, right? So it's not tied to your real identity the way that Twitter or Facebook is. This is often useful for people who want to talk about politically controversial topics or things that they find embarrassing. But this also leads to a problem called doxing. Now, doxing is where somebody tries to take a Reddit account and find out the real identity behind it. This has existed from long before Reddit, but has become particularly bad on Reddit. So the more you have attached to your username on Reddit, the easier it is to find out information about you, right? If you have years and years of posts, you can find out, what time of day someone's posting at, what communities are they active in. Maybe they mentioned a certain area of the country, so you can find out they're in that area. Maybe they linked off to another social media account. Like, it builds up and it creates more of a profile about you. So I thought, well, why not create a tool that lets people just clear out as much of that as possible so that it makes it harder for them to be doxxed, right? Now, on the Twitter side of things, there's been a lot of controversies that come out of Twitter. This is Kevin Hart. He's a stand-up comic you might know about. Back in 2011, he tweeted some not so great things. Recently, he was tapped to be the Oscar host. These tweets got dug up, and he was fired from that job. This is James Gunn. You might know who that is. He directed Guardians of the Galaxy Part 1 and 2. He was going to be directing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. A lot of really bad tweets about him got dug up, and then he lost that job. This doesn't just happen to celebrities. This happens to normal people who tweet something stupid, and then 5 years later, they're applying for a job. Someone at that job finds this tweet, they lose the job, or they lose relationships. It can happen. So Twitter's slogan is kind of what's happening, not what happened 10 years ago. So I thought, well, why not make a tool that can just make it be a certain period of time, like what's happening, and not, well, let me go through someone's 10 years of tweets and dig up something nasty about them so I can, assassinate their character. And let's be real, who among us hasn't tweeted something they regret, right? Yeah, I'll let those tweets speak for themselves. So now we've talked about the what and the how, and the why. Let's talk about the how, because this is a tech talk, right? We want to find out what kind of tech powered this app. So when I was building Social Amnesia, I knew I would need some way to maintain the state between sessions of the app, right? So if you close an app and you open it back up, you don't want to lose all the configurations you already set, right? You don't have to log back in, you don't have to set everything. You can see here, if I open it up and I change some value, to 3425, and I quit the app, and I open it back up, that value has been saved. And the way I handle that is I use something called Shelve. Shelve is built right into Python. It basically lets you create a persistent dictionary that lives across Python sessions. It's stored as a file on the desktop. It doesn't go up to any kind of cloud or is backed up anywhere unless you provide extra ways to do that. So it is just one locally stored file. It's very easy to set up. You can see here, if you can see my mouse there, we have config path. We set a path right to the config directory. You can pick any directory you want. This is just a nice one because it's hidden from the user, so they're not going to find it unless they want to go dig into it. You can actually see it on my desktop here. We got Reddit state and Twitter state. These are the files that power the app. So when you set up Shelve, you basically say, okay, go to this path and do shelve.open state file path, and then you get the string there. And what this says is, okay, we're going to go there. If there is a file there, we're going to read all the information from that dictionary. And if there isn't there, we're going to create one so that future instances of the session of the app can get the information they need. Then once you have it set up, it basically works like any other Python dictionary. You can say, okay, state of username equals get username. It just uses key value pairs. Any data structure you can use in Python can go into this shelf. One thing to keep in mind is it's a bit more difficult for debugging. You can't just print the shelve like you'd print a Python object because it just prints out like shelve X and then a bunch of gibberish. You need to actually do for item of shelve or in shelve print item. Otherwise, it works exactly like a dictionary. And then this state.sync here just says, okay, this is like the save point in a video game. We're at a point where we want to make sure that everything is synced up right. Send all the information that we stored so far to that file and get any new information in that file. So that's how it maintains state across sessions. So now we have that set up, we can start talking about how do you actually hit one of these APIs. So I used praw to hit the Reddit API. Praw is the Python Reddit API wrapper. It's open source, it's very easy to use. You can set up a Reddit instance just like this here. You give it a username, a password, and you also need to give it a client ID and a client secret. These are generated when you actually make an app in Reddit. You can see here I've like developed many different apps, but when you make a script in here, it just gives you those things, and those basically let you hit the Reddit API directly. User agent is just a string, something like, you know, social amnesia 1.2.0 by Nick Gotch. Like, it just tells Reddit what thing is hitting it right now. Once you have that set up, I store it right in that shelved state, and it actually maintains across sessions. So you can see here that I'm still logged in, even though I just closed the app and reopened it. Once you've got that hooked up, you've got your Reddit account hitting the API, it's pretty simple to get all the items from that account. Reddit state of user is the instance I just set up. .comments.new with limit none says, okay, go to Reddit and get every single comment of that user. You can do the same thing for posts, and then you can use some Python magic to basically just sum all that up. One for blank in Reddit state, user comments new, limit none, basically just says, okay, find out how many comments that users posted. If they posted 760 comments, we'll have that number and we'll have all the comments. Once we have that, what I do is just this is the actual logic that powers the deletion loop in social amnesia. It says, okay, for that item list, for that item array, for all the items in it, if it passes all the conditions. So this is an example of a condition. If item.score is greater than max score, meaning if you wanted to save all your Reddit posts that got more than 500 upvotes, it would check each one and say, okay, this one got 560 upvotes, so we're going to save that, we're going to pass. But this one did not meet that condition. It has 460. So we're going to edit it, and we're going to delete it. Now, the reason we edit it, it's a bit interesting, actually. So the Reddit admins claim that they only store the most recent edit of any item on their servers. We don't know this for sure because their code's not open source now. But this is what they claim. So they say if you delete an item, it'll still be like, we'll still have that text stored in our servers. But if you edit it and then delete it, that last edit will be the only thing we have stored. So it's the best tactic I know of to get rid of it from Reddit as well as possible. So next up is Twitter. For Twitter, I use something called TweetPy, I think is how you pronounce it. I don't really know with these open source things. It works a lot like Praw. You set up a script on the Twitter developer panel, and then you get a consumer key, a consumer secret, an access token, and an access token secret. TweetPy has this really nice OAuth handler, which means even if you have 2FA set up on Twitter, it says, don't worry, you're verified. You don't have to get a 2FA code each time. We can just go right past that. Reddit has a way of doing that too, but you have to use something called a refresh token, and it's much more difficult to set up, so I didn't include it in this. But if you ever want to know how to get 2FA working on Reddit through the API, I spent many hours on that, so come talk to me. Tweetp.api auth, actually, once you have auth set up, is an instance of the API you can use. So I set it to Twitter API. To actually get all the tweets, it's a little bit different in Praw because Twitter only lets you get 200 tweets at a time, 200 items at a time. So what you have to do is you have to make a new list, and then you get the 200 items, and then you extend that list you just made with those 200 items. And then once you have that, you go to item number 200, and you go one ID past that to the 200 first tweet. And then you repeat the process. You get the next 200. You extend your full tweet list with that. You move to tweet number 401, and then you continue to process until you run out of tweets. So it's just a little bit more complicated than Reddit, but not much more difficult. Then once we have that set up, we do the exact same thing we did in Reddit, where we just say, okay, if it passes all the conditions, we either destroy the status or we remove the favorite. Some people don't actually know this, but if you click the little heart button on any tweet on Twitter, that's all publicly accessible if your account is public. You can go to the likes section of Twitter. You can see everything somebody ever hit like on. Ted Cruz actually got in a bunch of trouble for this. If you heard about that case, it was pretty hilarious. So Ted Cruz might have benefited from social amnesia, maybe. A couple good things to know about these APIs. Reddit has a limit of 1,000 items. So you can only go 1,000 items back from whatever the most recent comment or post is. Twitter does 3,200 items back. I'm looking into ways around this. I don't know any exact way to do it right now. Reddit has like a search feature you can hit through the API, which might let you get more things. Twitter has a way to get to like a Twitter archive, which supposedly has all your tweets. These are the kind of stretch goals I want to get past it. But if you are working with these APIs, definitely note these limitations exist because they're important. Okay, so this is kind of the back-end logic of social amnesia, right? We've got storing state, we've got hitting Reddit, we've got hitting Twitter. None of this is that useful for the user, though, until you actually tie it all together. If you just kind of build this as is, they're going to have to do some command line scripts. They're going to have to like set up some configuration files in like a YML or something. So we're going to take a piece of advice from one of my favorite TV shows.
For weeks, I've been investigating the cabbie killer murders with a certain morbid fascination.
This is in real time.
I'll create a GUI interface using Visual Basic. See if I can track an IP address.
I love this clip because the first time you watch it, you think, man, what? That was just complete gibberish. That didn't make any sense. Like, what is she talking about? A GUI interface in Visual Basic? But I thought about it, and this is actually really cool, right? Because she was going off to write some like crazy hacker script to track this killer's IP address. But she knew that like maybe they would catch the killer this time, but there'd be future times where these CSI guys would have to track the killer's IP address. So she built a GUI interface so that the CSI guys could go off even if she's not there and track the killer's IP address. Now, her choice of Visual Basic, a bit suspect, but regardless, take some advice from CSI. If you make a piece of tech that is not going to be for technical users, build a way for them to use it. Don't just expect them to run a bunch of command lines. This is actually a lot of inspiration for social amnesia, is the tools I found online that were useful for doing this involved running some Python script, setting up some complicated YML configuration. You had to clone this all from GitHub. Like, it's not something that non-technical users would be able to do. So we're going to talk about creating a GUI interface using tkinter. Tkinter is one of the GUI options you have in Python. It's built right into Python. Another couple options are, I think, Qt and WX or some of the other ones. tkinter works well if you just need a very simple interface. It's got buttons, it's got entry fields, it's got drop downs. It doesn't work great if you need like a particularly complicated thing, but if you're just trying to scope up something quick, tkinter will do the job. So this is an example of how I use tkinter in social amnesia, basically. You set root equal to tkinter.tk. You set the frame equal to tkinter.frameroot. That's basically your like window that everything gets built on. There's a couple ways to set up layouts in tkinter. One of them is grid. That's what I tend to use most often. Basically, if you use grid, you make components, in this case labels. They're just like text items, like first spot is the text I put in the first one, second spot. And then you just put them at the grid. So you do row equals 0, column equals 0. We'll put that at the first spot right there. Row equals 0, column equals 1. We'll go in the second spot. It's like an Excel spreadsheet. You just put items in the grid where you want. And that's how I built most of social amnesia. There's just grids of stuff. It's like this is the login grid with all the components. This is the configuration grid. This is the deletion grid, scheduler grid. And it's just, you know, from there it's just labels, buttons, entry fields, and whatnot. You can find out how, you know, if you just Google like tkinter entry field, if you want to do that. I mean, if you start building your app, that'll pretty much give you all the information you need about it. What I do want to talk about is how you actually like wire up the app once you have tkinter going. So for the most part, the buttons are what actually do everything in this thing. If I enter some text, it like just kind of holds that text until I actually hit a button, which is where stuff actually happens. It, you know, it sets stuff in the state. It whitelists things. It'll actually go and call the prod or tweetpy stuff to go delete things from the actual social media services. This is an example of the set max score button. You notice here it's like a button. You put it on the configuration frame. You set the text, and then you have this command field. So this command field takes in basically a function, but you can't just pass it. If I didn't have this lambda here, I couldn't just pass it reddit.setMaxScore, max score entry field I get, because it would immediately run that function as soon as the UI rendered. What lambda does, and if you don't really know what lambda is, it's an anonymous function. It's basically a way of creating. It's usually a way of creating functions without a name. In this case, it basically says, okay, don't run this function until the button is pressed. And so in this case, it'll say, okay, when the button's pressed, I'll take whatever's in that entry field, max score entry field.get, and I will enter it into the Reddit state. So now it's saved. So if you quit the app, it will be, it'll still be there, and it can read that. It can read from there when you go into the deletion loop. So last piece of technical thing I want to talk about is scheduling. When I was building, let me scroll that into the frame. When I was building social amnesia, this was particularly important to me because I wanted to be proactive rather than reactive. If somebody doxes you or digs up some old nasty tweets, you're already screwed. Like, but if you can continuously clear out these things over time, if a little thing pops up every day and says, okay, it's 7 p.m., do you want to, we found this many tweets that match your configurations, do you want to delete them? And I always make sure to ask people, I won't just go and delete without getting confirmation from the user. That's a much more effective way to ensure people are maintaining their privacy online. So the scheduler, the way it works is it takes in the tkinter root and it takes in the hour of day option. And it says, okay, store that hour of day and then get whatever the current time is. And datetime, again, is a package built into Python. So you can say datetime.now.time.hour. If it actually is the right time, if current time, if it's like you said you want to run this at 7 p.m., if current time is actually 7 p.m. and we have not already run it this hour, then call the deletion script. And that works on Reddit or Twitter. And then set already ran bool to true. Otherwise, if it's any other hour of the day, set the bool back to false. And lastly, this is the important part here, the root in tkinter has this after function. And what it says is after 60,000 milliseconds, every minute, call set scheduler again. So it's just looping through. After every minute, it just calls it again, loops through, checks conditions, says, are we in the conditions where we should run it? Are we in the right hour and have we not already run this hour? If so, do that. Else, just keep looping through. And so it just checks us every minute, and it seems to, it will schedule it to run every day. So that's all the technical part of stuff I want to talk about. One thing I do want to point out is that I only used 2 things that weren't built into Python to build this project, which is one of the things I find most impressive when I work in Python. I'm a JavaScript developer during the day. I'm used to working with 8 different dependencies that all have 500 more dependencies connected to them. It's pretty cool to build something and say, oh, I've only got 2 dependencies and neither of them have any other dependencies. So that's something I really like about Python. So lastly, I want to talk about, this isn't going to be technical. This is going to talk about how if you build a side project, how do you get people to notice it? How do you get people to pay attention to it? And the reason I want to talk about this is I've gone to tech talks before and people will say, well, I built this really cool framework. I built this really cool app and it's got thousands of users and 100,000 GitHub stars and everybody's tweeting about it. And they never talk about how it got to that point. It feels like they just put it online and magically it was just successful and famous and everybody loved it. And maybe if you're really a top developer, everybody knows about you, you can just tweet about a project once and it will have that kind of following. But most of us don't have that. So I want to talk a bit about how do you get people to notice your project? And it's important to get people to notice your project because that's how you actually build good software. You need to get user feedback. It's easy to get tunnel vision when you're working on a project and say, okay, I really want to have this feature and this feature that's useful to me. When you actually interact with the communities that might use your project, you realize that you won't have thought of tons of things that people will want. And I'll give you an example of this. When I was building social amnesia, I got it to a point where I was kind of happy with it. I put it on Reddit and then got the immediate feedback of, well, this is cool, but can I edit comments without deleting them? And this is something I had never thought of personally. I never thought, well, that would be useful. But it helped me drive development toward a feature that people actually seem to want. So if you get things out there, and in the startup world, they call this MVP, minimum viable product. So specifically viable, not great, not good, not even mediocre. As soon as you have something viable, if you get it out there, you'll get feedback, which will help you actually develop a useful and good project. And it'll also help you stay passionate about the project because it's easy to just develop something for a while. You get to a point where you're kind of okay with it. You put it on GitHub and then you just forget about it and it just kind of sits there and nothing ever really comes of it. But if you get people actually involved in it, you have a lot more motivation to continue working on it. And this is how you find contributors, which is how you make a successful open source project. So let's talk a little bit about how you can do this. First off, you have to find people that want to use your project, right? So in my case, it was privacy-focused individuals. So I hung out on the privacy subreddit for a bit. And one of the things I saw was that people would often talk about well, I'm into privacy, but I can't get any of my friends to care about it. They just tweet all kinds of crazy stuff. They post whatever on Facebook. None of them care about anything. It's just this could be really bad for them in the future, but I can't get them to do anything. So I thought, well, why don't I develop an app that they could just run in the background, and once a day it pops up and deletes a bunch of old stuff they don't care about. They can just hit confirm, boom. That way I can share it to these people on the privacy focused areas, and they can give it to their friends and family or whatnot, right? So actually hanging out on an area where I thought this might be useful helped me figure out a path towards making a project that people actually wanted to use. Maybe you're making a cooking app. You should hang out in a cooking subreddit or Pinterest or something and see what people actually need, see what's actually useful. Combine what you want to build with what other people might want, and that's how you can make a project that you're really passionate about continually developing. So I'll talk about a couple sites that I promoted this app, and I 100% appreciate the irony of promoting an app that destroys social media content on social media. But Reddit, what I would do is basically every time I released any kind of new content, I would make like a Google Doc and it would have like 5 different subreddits, and I would just like submit it to all of them. I would track like the link of all of them, and I would say, okay, in each of these posts I say, well, what's new? What is this? By the way, just adding like any kind of logo, we can whip one up in a few minutes, makes your project look so much more professional. You say, what's new? What is this? Who's it for? Here's some screenshots. Now, give me questions and comments. And the most important thing about Reddit is just post it often, because it's completely random and a chaotic mess. And sometimes you'll get 10 upvotes and sometimes you'll get 500 upvotes. And like you just got to keep posting it until it's somewhat successful. It doesn't happen quickly. Like you'll post it a bunch of times and maybe one time you get like, a couple users and that's cool. And then one time you get a couple more. Like it's just kind of piles on. So you have to continuously do it. So that's why I say do it every time you release any new feature, and it will drive more content or drive more people to use it. This isn't Hacker News, but this is the GitHub Insights panel. Some people don't notice, but if you make an open source project on GitHub and you go to Insights and you go to Traffic, you can actually get some basic analytics about who's visiting your repo, where are they coming from, what are they looking at. You notice here that like way more people came from Hacker News than from Reddit. That's news.ycombinator.com if you haven't heard of it. It's like Reddit, but more boring. Basically, one thing, I think the reason why I got so much more content, even though my Hacker News post got like 50 points and my post on Reddit got like 200 points, is that there's only one page on Hacker News. It's just one big front page. So if you can get something on there, you can get a lot of people coming to your project. And the people who tend to browse Hacker News often have really insightful and useful information about you, comments about your project. Lastly, Twitter. I wish I had some good way to say like, you can tweet and thousands of people retweet this or whatever. No, I have no idea how to use Twitter. Pretty much, like I think if your best bet is to hope somebody who does have a lot of followers retweets what it is. But what you can do is I set up this app. It's called If This Then That, and basically anytime somebody tweets about this link, it will send a notification to my phone. So if somebody is tweeting about the app, I can quickly see, okay, someone's tweeting about it. I should go respond and say, I made this. What comments do you have? What questions do you have? You can actually interact and be part of that conversation. I've been burned before where somebody tweeted about a side project I worked on. It got some attention, but then I didn't find out about it till like 2 weeks later, and that's like a million years in Twitter time. So it's already gone. Okay, that's my talk. Let's say thank you, Jacob, for organizing. Thank you, Anaconda, for sponsoring and bringing beer, and thank all of you for coming. And I can take some questions now if anybody has any questions. And if you, yeah. Do we have more than one microphone maybe, or no? We don't have one. Okay. All right. Well, regardless, if you have a question, yeah.
So for the API limits, is that on a per query basis or is that per day?
It's set by. Yeah, right. It is. They said is the API limit on a per query basis or per day? As I understand it, it's set based off whenever the most recent like item is. So if there's 990, if there's actually 1,000 items, if there's one more item posted, the 1,001st item will no longer be indexed by the API. As I understand it, that's how the API works.
You can do multiple in a day. I mean, you can do as many as you want.
Yeah, right. You don't. This isn't like a rate limit. Yeah, so it will hit 1,000 items back for that user, and you can do that as many times as you want. Like, if you're running millions of these queries, Twitter or Reddit might get mad at you and ban you. But if you do it like a couple times a day, they're not gonna care. But you can only go 1,000 items back specifically for that individual, for that user account. Yeah. I have. The main reason I don't want, well, there's 2 reasons I haven't. The first is that I don't want to spend any money on this. The second is that I don't want to have people trust me with their credentials. Like I don't really, like I personally, if somebody was like, hey, I have this thing, put your Reddit and Twitter info on it and I'll promise to keep it safe, I wouldn't believe them. So like I don't expect people to believe me to keep this safe if I just some random site on the internet. That's why I made it just an app for people to download. And also this way, you know, when I get sick of it in 2 years, I don't have to keep paying for it to be online somewhere. People can still have access to it, assuming the API still works at that point. Other questions?
Once we found the phone, no. Oh, okay. Question. Get you next.
How did you package your app? Is it just work on Macs?
No, so I use something called CX Freeze. I didn't talk about that in this, but CX Freeze basically turns it into a DMG on Mac. So it runs just like a basic application on Mac. On Windows, it's like a .exe file. I think on Linux you can package it up depending on a Linux distro, but I only have access to a Windows and Mac machine to like test them on, so I've only packaged it for Windows and Mac. But CX Freeze will basically take all of your Python code, wrap it up into one like package that you just double click it and it runs on the machine. This is something I can actually show you. It looks just like any other app, kind of like it's on there. On Windows it'll just be like, it'll run like an app, like I don't know, Spotify or Discord or anything like that. Yeah, so just type CX Freeze into Google and you'll be able to find what I use to do that. Yeah.
So I was curious if you had any like logging built into that, like if someone wanted to know what they did delete, just for like a warm fuzzy feeling that like, okay, I'm glad I removed that. Does that have any capabilities?
No, I don't save anything, though it should be, I could add that. It would basically just be like print out like a .txt file of here we deleted this much stuff. But I don't have that set up currently, but it is a good idea. Yeah.
Anyone? I have. Oh, okay.
Did you look at any other social media platforms? Facebook, Instagram?
I absolutely. I would
Mark Cuban
love.
had a Snapchat version.
I would love.
a couple years
Snapchat
back.
wouldn't be too useful, I imagine. But like, I would love to get this working on Facebook. They are a bit more hostile to this kind of thing than Reddit or Twitter is. Instagram's actually one of my next goals because I have a little bit of experience messing with their API. It's like kind of a private API, but they have like unofficial ways to get to it. I've looked at Discord too, actually. Yeah, I really want to make this work with Facebook. It's going to take a lot of work to get to with Facebook, and I'm scared that I'm going to build it, and Facebook's going to just change the API the next day and completely break my app. Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, so while we're going to take a recess, but before we go to a recess, I do have a question. So summarize whatever you were doing just with the capabilities that you have in just a few sentences. Can you delete, add, insert, copy, save? What are the capabilities you have and which platforms?
So this app works on Mac, Windows, Linux, anything you run Python on. It will delete items on Reddit. That means posts and comments. On Twitter, that means tweets, retweets, and favorites. And it will delete them on a schedule so you can set it up to run each day. And it will take in configurations like whitelisting specific items you want to keep, saving a specific period of time, saving items that get enough traction if they get enough favorites on Twitter or upvotes on Reddit. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And the main application?
The main application is to help you maintain your privacy online.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And do you actually use it yourself, or
yeah.
is it mainly for other people to use?
Yeah, I built it because I was using an app called ShredIt for a while, which you ran like through the Python command line. It didn't do everything I wanted it to do, but I wanted it to clear out my Reddit account over time. So now I run this each day on my Reddit account to clean up cool stuff. I will use it sometimes for Twitter. Twitter, I don't really post on that much that I care enough. I kind of just built it for Twitter because I thought it'd be useful for Twitter as well, and I want to learn about it. But I only use it regularly for my Reddit account. Maybe if I start tweeting a lot more, I'll start using it for Twitter. But I pretty rarely ever. You can see it right here. But this is my public one. My private one, I'm not going to tell you. But you get the idea, right? I want to maintain my privacy, right?
Can you also do a list of words that you want to search for specifically?
So, oh, you're saying like
keyword
keywords?
list.
I don't have that set up, but that would be a cool way to like, okay, yeah, I want to delete everything that had insert politician name here or whatever. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Is it open for other people to contribute? Like you have a Github
Yes,
repository, people
yes,
can submit
definitely.
pull requests or whatever?
If you go to my Twitter, it's like all over there. If you just type in socialamnesia.com, it'll redirect to the GitHub. So come check it out. Please contribute if you want. I accept PRs, issues, everything. So if you're looking for a project, and if you know UX, please help me, because I don't know UX. Yeah, definitely accepting contributions. Yeah, just type in socialamnesia.com or search Social Amnesia GitHub on Google, and it'll show up.
Unless anyone has more questions, we'll take a recess, let's say until 8:15.
Yeah. Oh, and I will also, I'll put these slides, I'll tweet out a link to these slides too, so if you want to take a look at them. And I believe this is recorded too.
Yeah,
so.
there's a link on your Meetup to the recording, so you'll be able to see it later, to see the things that you missed. You'll find it on your Meetup page.
Thanks again.
8:15 we'll reconvene. We have a small lightning talk. Yeah. And it's about black holes. About black holes, the lightning talk.